I guess I was mistaken. I thought the last post, or not the last, but 82 was Groundhog's Day. Maybe it's just because it feels like it, but I guess Groundhog's Day is actually February 2nd. Today being Friday the 13th caused me to realize that, as well as this next post being February 29th, the leap year day. This whole timing apparatus has kind of got me off, although I noticed that I'd posted this at 3:23, which is the number of Uranus, and then just in the last couple days, as well as all these drone sightings, um, there's this. The number 323 stood out to me, as well as vials. That word's a code word to me. 107. Um, which is funny because I was thinking about how I looked up the etymology of test, because 83 TEST in the last post, and how test means essentially earthen pot for melting, usually melting metals, testing metals by heating them in a clay pot, and testa, which would be 84, which made me think of Anthony Testa in his book The Key of the Abyss. It's just funny, but test got me thinking with this vials thing. Not that there's any relation, it's just the hyperdimensional or twilight language of it all in events. Um, what I really wanted to talk about was this thing that I saw when reading this. It mentions March 21st. And yet, something about all these dates, and I mean, there's no one more significant date than another. It's just these weird interlocking dates, I guess, between things. But this year, I had mentioned in post 81 that this day was very significant for me this year, and I had to go through a sort of an ordeal. Um, it took a week or two, and I used absinthe as a way to sort of bring up memories, but then not purge them necessarily, but to go through them. And it just sucks because the last few years have been psychologically weird, just games, like a test almost. But anyway, that date stood out to me, and then it says something about 2025. A bunch of things are pointing to 2025. The last post I read leads up to 2025 being 45 cubed. But it ended up leading me to realize essentially 84 is the number of years in a year of for Uranus, and it's got what was it? Something about their moons, 13 or 28 moons, 18 and 13 regular moons, 13 inner moons. And then it's got a 369-day orbital synodic period. I don't know, the 82 stood out to me. 42,000. What did it say about? So 42 years of sunlight and darkness at its poles. 42 connects to the rainbow, of course, and the rainbow, Uranus being heaven, it's like the bridge to heaven. The discovery date is March 13th. That number has come up the last two posts because of it being the Phoenix Lights. I don't know what what this necessarily suggests, but it's what it led me to realize, and it's kind of why I like doing this and rereading this blog, because it's further tying things in. But going back to this, I know that Alice Bailey comes up and the year 1917 keeps coming up. It's also when you type in different ways, like Ernest Rutherford split the atom. It says in 1917 when he conducted experiments where he bombarded nitrogen nuclei with alpha particles, but then the AI will also give different results. So 1918, you'd have to really look into pretty much the history of it. Major turning points and essentially nodes where, again, these things tie together. But what was I going to say? Also, 1940 was a major year. That was 84 years ago, which is when essentially manufacturing uranium was feasible for weapons. And so, what does this necessarily mean? I know it stood out to me when I was thinking about this immediately, like nuclear is 300, and decay could be with a Gimel, 323. Nuclear decay, Uranus. There's something about radiation, and it like the whole thing about 82, 22, and even the 41 number that in post 82. Behind all that is this concept of the gray aliens being called zetas. Zeta is 22, plural is 82. But yet, there's also something called zeta rays, which are used by physicists to describe physics that go beyond the standard model. Short rays of light radiation discovered in 1923. And there's kind of a lot to this. It says, are aliens communicating with neutrino beams? Or essentially zeta rays? Possibly. Obviously, what's the point when possibly they could be even here already and stuff, but this concept points to this theory I've been contemplating and thinking about, which is, again, the lights in the UFOs being essentially like lighthouses in a sense, like in the most basic prototype, but for messages in a sense through time. It's something to do with, it makes me think again of Alice Bailey and certain predictions she had about technology, and it's sort of like what it's doing or what it's tending towards, which is biologic, like life form in a sense. Um, it's forming itself. Again, like AI or artificial intelligence, which is automata, self-replicating automata, etc., which seems to predate our making of it. So, it could be what is like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but because too much of it is speculation. But I'm just finding these different, following these little paper trails of these things that surprise me, like because it's that's the thing. I'm like not looking into this like, oh, this, I know this. It's more like I'm looking for what I don't know and what stands out, which this whole, again, like 323. It's just the funny, like, I don't know. I'm not going to try and apologize for this whole situation. It's hard to explain, but also the keys and the power of the beast. Like the keys came to me, like it occurred to me that the keys of Uranus, dissecting the body of God with the keys of Uranus, and then the keys and the power of the beast. There's multiple layers to what that refers to. Essentially, like a key is a key, though, but it makes me think back to essentially the codes that I put here, not the 41 codes, but the triple number codes of essentially what I said are called the UFO UAP codes of the Kabbalah of Nine Chambers, and the many things that as things keep progressing, and I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, like there shouldn't be a surprise, but it's too much to maintain consciously, like in the, to have like on hand in the forefront of your mind. But anyway, um, I'm gonna like loosely go off what I just referenced, Uranus, which there's more I wanted to go into regarding what I read about this. Even the part of the mythology, this stood out to me, the adamantine sickle. I had to calculate it. And the adamantine sickle, it's kind of like the Kartika, like in the Tibetan Furba sense, but the Kartika is kind of a sickle in a sense, but that's just what comes to mind. It's 323. So again, adamantine being like clear, the clarity behind the overlap is just funny. So, beginning this post, finally, it's the keys and the power of the beast, which is 666. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Revelation 13 through 18. It is long overdue, this post, but a good amount of preceding material and preparation needed to be effected in order to best apprehend and disseminate the material now to be covered. This is a subject with many tentacles, but all of which come back to this central issue which forms the belly of the beast, which must be tamed and made to look at itself, for there is no slaying by mere dismemberment and burial of its many heads. The hydra must be forced to look at its reflection. This black iron prison of Malkuth, the body, life, of which the Buddha said consists wholly of sorrows, is the asylum to which every condemned criminal is kept in their sentencing, which in some cases extends further than a single death sentence. All life is suffering. From the unions that are made, the shadows that pass and are done, are but that. It is, then, imperative not to cling and hold on to these shadows. This, however, can be difficult owing to their constant reappearance in monstrous and nightmarish imagery. In a way, existence is like Saturn, who represents both the dense ground and material which is tilled and harvested, but also time, or Kronos, the keeper of order, the devourer of offspring. Saturn is loosely connected to Satan, and both represent similar things and have an enlightened aspect signifying the transformation or purification of the lower, symbolized by lead, into the higher, gold. Psychologically, the darkness represents the sub or unconscious, which must be faced, tilled, and integrated for balance in the conscious mind to be possible. As we all know, repression, suppression, and ignorance breed bigger demons and problems, than if they were faced from before they take root. And this it's funny because so much of these blog posts, like just little things, tie into. Like I was just thinking today of how much, not recently, but like earlier in the year, clearing out weeds is like a very therapeutic thing. Um, and I don't know, it's causes me to end up thinking of all the thoughts that happened when I did that. But it's just funny because the root, vine, weed symbolism, it's not really symbolism. It's very profound. This too is imperative for certain people to understand if they wish to not become the monster they originally sought to defeat, but through weakness and fear, joined. I'm not only referring to the backwards and hypocrite so called Christians that fail to follow the words of Jesus as they so fervently claim, more so than actually doing, but primarily to the industrial minded upholders of another institution of even greater influence and control, which too has many backwards and hypocritical features that should be considered without hesitation if real progress is to be made and truth be gained. The medical and healthcare industry has so many incongruities of its own throughout recent history that they could and should be considered in light of certain church based inclemencies preceding, and many parallels in the general direction of both will be seen. It makes me think of The Manufacture of Madness by Thomas Szasz. What it amounts to is that in the name of either, in the old case, salvation, or now in the case of health and safety, we have gone to such backbending extremes to include both wants and needs, analogues and idealizations, that we have almost ensured neither salvation nor health and safety as a result. You cannot serve both God and mammon. Matthew 6:24. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Just like the war on drugs, war on drugs enables the assassination or imprisonment or any level of infliction against personal and social well-being that are much worse than the drugs themselves. Often relatively harmless substances such as cannabis, which doesn't have any deaths associated with its ingestion, whereas legal substances such as tobacco and alcohol are associated with over a total of 400,000 deaths together annually. See the CDC's Tobacco and Alcohol Facts. Or the false premise that any governmental institution is actually concerned at all with real health or safety, as long as perfectly legitimate and healthy substances are strongly regulated while overtly, even labeled cancer-causing, health-reducing substances are both less regulated but even more heavily marketed, often to children, candy, soft drinks, etc. This is a form of insanity, and there is a campaign for mass rationalization, acceptance, and wantonness for it to be furthered through media, food, pharmaceuticals, and social propaganda platforms. Many mental health institutions are also complicit in the forced drugging and deception of citizens about the long-term health effects of such drugs, many of which have not even existed long enough to fully understand their total effects. Alternative therapies, many of which do not even require the ingestion of any mind-altering substances, are also being suppressed. Often, the cure for any ailment merely comes by removing its causes. It could be again that this backwards and deranged system could exacerbate many of these causes rather than remediate. These are issues we must be able to face if we are to be honest about a real concern for human health, safety, dignity, and salvation from what seems to be an ever-deepening black hole on whose precipice we have been hinging quite precariously. This makes me think of today how I was thinking back on that um, Ezekiel passage, which if you read the whole I'd recommend reading the whole chapter of 36 Ezekiel. I mean, if I could, I'd read all of Ezekiel, all of Job, and all of the three books of Enoch. Uh, but I don't want to drag out like into it a whole year. But it's there. But anyway, it makes me think of the whole mended or reformed heart, and it made me think of heal heart. And I saw that was close to 666, so I was like, heal. What about healed heart? And I was like, healed heart. Well, that's you could take the teth and put a tau, but it's still like 5 away. So healed. And I was like, ED is 9. That's T essentially. So HEART heart with a teth, and then HEAL tau. Hey, heart health is 666. Again, everything to do with the sun and the heart and health. So it just came to mind because I was thinking about that today. Like these little, like when you know these little formulaic uh, nuances, essentially, like you can see these things. They'll literally present themselves, or at least they do to me. Um, it's like little blocks will fall into place, and it's like voila, you see what it can like formulate into as being a sort of, it's more than just a mnemonic though. There's some sort of subconscious organizational patterning in language that, again, you'd have to look into the whole like Hindu concept of Divani and Sphota, which I've mentioned mostly in like post 76. But if we cannot make this achievement, then perhaps we shalt not chance at infecting more of our surroundings with our blind arrogance of being so qualitatively retarded. I like give the definition because I had called someone retarded in 4th grade, this kid Brandon, and just mainly because my sister would say that so much that it was like a go-to thing. But the Miss Underwood, my teacher, which was when 9/11 happened, 4th grade, she made me like write the definition of retard like I think 80 times. That's just what comes to mind. Not that it matters. It's just a weird number, not even 100. But to delay or hold back in terms of progress, development, or accomplishment. But the problem with what she did was cause me to understand like how effectively like the word like I'm like fire retardant puts out fires, and that seems to be what is almost like wrong with people's brains. So why can't I call people retarded? Uh, it took me a while to. It's still not out of my vocabulary actually, so never mind. It's taking a while, we'll say. Laws, rules, and regulations are intended to be just and inherently right. But, you know, when this is no longer the case and instead they are used for control by the few over the many, or to outright, genocidally eliminate your opposition, overtly through war and unjust laws, or covertly through human medical sterilization, and soft kill bioweapons, then neither shall the lawmakers, upholders, or abiders be seriously expected to either carry out duties effectively, if even capacitively. Maybe I meant capacitatively. I don't know which would be the more proper. This whole thing's probably improper, but thus is the state of our collective insecurity, which will inevitably lead to an implosive collapse of equal or greater effect. You can't have your cake and eat it too. The dominoes are already set in motion. That makes me want pizza now. But if you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. If you work under and for corruption, you will die under and for corruption. I myself and marred by the am marred by the still constant harassment of my father for not joining the military like he and his father did. Even though at the same time I've had to hear from him how bad they treat him, along with all the stuff I already know about how military personnel are looked at as disposable fodder, or not really looked at as, it's kind of just not looked at. Too stupid to see or even care that they're being used as pawns to uphold a system, which the vehemence in my like this, me and my dad have gotten a better relationship, kind of, and he, but at the time it was just like so annoying, and but yeah, I've gotten a better respect, I guess, for people like, and I understand why people would assume that oh, well, I'll be fine, like I'll get my pension, and but there's a lot of things you don't know. Being used as pawns to uphold a system that only keeps the pristine illusion that it supports them, which is why they're always like support the military. Like, shouldn't it be logical to support the military? But the like, maybe I just smoked weed too much one day. But it occurred to me that like the phrase and then the incessant like use of it, or at least in my school and stuff, uh, it was almost like how much do you have to convince? Like, I don't know, just sloganeering. Like, if there was like, you'd think that they would have other ways of kind of saying it, and presenting it, and doing it. But that to me was probably, I don't know, just interesting. That, and I know that the majority of people who join do so out of sheer desperation, not actual patriotism. In which case, if they were smart, they would find more effective and with more leadership than something more effective and with more leadership than blindly taking orders you not intend to understand nor which you're allowed to. This is how greater tragedies are carried out and perpetuated that last eons, while daily distractions on infinitesimally smaller levels saturate all to a level of languish, apathy, and eventually effective assimilation. Such is thus. But anyway, actual psychopaths like to go on witch hunts for people they can use as a distraction from their own psychopathic tendencies and actions. How often are our political leaders investigated or, when found in contempt of the law, brought to justice? How often are our psychologists and psychiatrists evaluated themselves? And why are these questions so uncomfortable for those whose job it is to deal with these things in the general public, who should be concerned about their own well-being and that of their children's future well-being? Sometimes people prefer a comfortable lie than the painful truth, even if that lie turns out to be much more painful than the initial shock of truth. Sometimes people have to find out the hard way. The Nazi Schutzstaffel, with their symbol, the swastika, again, I'm just showing that it's 666, that's why it's capitalized, in case you haven't noticed by now, are a prime example used throughout political psychology as a sort of yardstick in which to measure various attributes of a person or group. It is ironic that I have found these to be formulaic representations of the number of the beast, 666. 666, 603 score and 6, could then be a number indicative of a type of Hitlerian psychology. I have analyzed this number more extensively than anyone else I've hitherto read, and appear to be the only one that has recognized and expounded the Hebrew-English gematria cipher, such as when you simply apply Hebrew to English and then see that it's the Kabbalah of 9 chambers. Many people deny that Hebrew and English could fuse so aptly, but what I have found is this is the revealed interpretation of the Kabbalah in New Eon, the Lemic and Mayashan terms. 666 is not only the number of the beast, it is also the keys and the power of the beast, which again are the keys and power to defeat it, and of the evolution of man toward God. And I don't know if I'll remember it, but I wanted to say it in the last post, but I guess I'll say it now. But contemplating the whole Golgotha, the mystery of Golgotha, as Rudolf Steiner calls it, but tying in with Post 81 and a certain vision I had of essentially this tower. Like, I associated it with the Tower Tarot card, but it was like a hotel in my mind at a friend's house. Essentially, it's hard to explain, but I saw like this. I don't want to say a bridge, but I associated the concept of the path of Samek crossing the path of the tower as being this sort of like I likened it to the kingdom portals of Spyro, because again, that's the kingdom portals is 666, or the kingdom portals, and the whole thing about portals being 450, 450 being instead of 1 through 9, which is 45, 10 through 90, and the Malkuthian nature of the tens. But anyway, the kingdom portals. And again, that goes to this vision I had with the help of mushrooms, but way back in 2011 at a friend's house also, of these hexagons, essentially, like this rainbow hexagon room that essentially could lead to anywhere, like, because it was like the fusion point between Tifereth and Kether in my mind. And if you can go into that realm, you can come back out through other portals. But anyway, theoretically, this whole vision that I had in Golgotha ties in with what it was, I could have to pull out my notes, but I know it's the next, and then 102, human. The next human is 666. And it was after like meditating on the skull and the whole idea of like elongated skulls and these various skulls, essentially, like, well, really like the crystal skulls, various uh, things having to do with the skull, tying in with Mayan uh, symbolism and whatnot. It's just, like I said, I didn't know if I would remember that, but the next human, there's some other stuff having to do with that go more elaborate, but I'll have to just integrate that more so I can actually speak on it. Yeah, the evolution of man. I have unlocked the abyss, doth, and have provided the keys thereof. If the Jews had utilized and kept up with their own Chakma Nestora, or secret wisdom, they may have, and it's not secret because people make it secret, but it takes development to see these, again, the nuances of certain things for them to, for first of all, like a foundation of understanding to come about through, again, these like networks of how things fit, which is like so-called experience. But anyway, they may have been able to see the Nazis coming ahead of time, but unfortunately did not. We now, however, do have the keys to decode the present and future beast systems, and I am advising any who read this to heed this or suffer the consequences. 666 is the key of the psychology of the human mind, and Hafren in Greek, which is like the mind or the reason. Phrenology comes to mind, being the root of that. There are various programs that are actively searching and attempting to map out the human brain and entire genomes of any and all species they can ascertain or create, in hopes that it will enable them to reverse engineer and then conquer the mysteries of biology, the knowledge of life and death. And I say them and they, but here's the problem: is it's like a collective impulse that is more unconscious than it is conscious among various networks and, groups, essentially civilizations. With this, virtually all neural privacy and control may become a thing of the past. I have already written briefly on the topic of the hive mind consciousness and the potential use of neural networks. For the past few decades, the military has been developing brain chips. Again, 666. It's like an obvious thing that yet, I mean, the relation between the idea of like an implant, the mark of the beast, 666. But yet, again, let's go, just sign me up, beam me up. Just recently, I saw this article by the Daily Mail about this. U.S. military successfully installs brain modems in animals as part of project to develop cyborg soldiers who use the cerebral implants to control machines. But there have been wishfully enticing articles like this for decades. but that's how long it's essentially supposedly been taking. And it's not that it's the development of the technology, it's the insulating and sealing off of the technology from other people, or from people. Oh, my snake. Sometimes he gets a little crazy, but he's been out. I had to stop him from knocking stuff over. This snake's name is Hades. I've had him for a while. I think he's been in some of the videos, but Hades is apt for to make an appearance. 323 is Hadit in Greek, which the root of Hades and Hadit. Go back to odd. What they don't explain is the potentially devastating effect that this will have on neurology, or how machines or machine input may then be able to manipulate human behavior, or again how different. Well, I mean, I'm sure they've been considering this since the MK Ultra days, but I was going to say, like, what would the effect of psychedelics have on, neurological device, like brain-machine interfaces? Nor do they seem to want to know. I guess if you don't care who you work for or what the effect of your actions entails, even if it means death of innocence, then what does it matter if you have absolutely no autonomy whatsoever? But again, it's like so many thoughts enter my mind, because you can't make blanket statements when you realize, like, obviously there's so many different angles that things. It's easy to. I don't know, it's hard to explain. 666 is indeed an actual implant and the implant digit, so go and receive a microchip as soon as you can. But until you understand this basic information, it will be rather useless for you. Before long, however, it will be mandatory. Another 666. Accept the mark of the beast chip. Do not deny the 666 chip. A 666 biochip will make such difficult tasks like typing a password or remembering your social security number a thing of the past. Why use an old-fashioned U.S. social security number? Vav Shin Shin Samek. When you can have the idea of the 666 beast last forever and have your entire mind and life controlled like a robot even more. This is the cliffothic or hollow aspect of 666. Being also the number of the sun, though, the active creative principle of self-awareness and will, it is also the formula of defeat. To fully transcend the beast system in its multitude of forms, one must take the mark of the beast. And I meant probably the mask of the beast, because that's like what Kenneth Grant says, like, to bypass the beast system, you have to assume the mask of the beast. Probably should actually edit that, because I don't like when certain things are like qualitatively like, I don't care if there's a typo here and there, but I don't want it to say one must take the mark of the beast, and having done so identify fully with the contents of the universe, nightmare and all. But the fear of that, again, like, you almost have to just bite the bullet. Not really. Don't actually do that. Here I am rationalizing my mistakes out loud. So in order to truly awaken beyond it, the typhonic volcano must erupt, devouring all, and Cthulhu must awaken and unite the forces of the deep ones with the outer ones. This is the true meaning of the swastika, for it is the whirling motion of awakened spirit uniting the inner with the outer, and spirit and matter. The warping of the now into the future, and back, which, when inverted, becomes an all-consuming black hole. The mark of the beast, the O and the X, signifies the cracking open of the egg of spirit, which from without externally entails death, but from within naturally brings new life. 666 is thus the soul within, which has been feared, rejected, demonized, yet said to be the knowledge of which was lost, but if regained would confer immortality and the knowledge of God. Take then this mark without fear and own it in its true sense. So the mark as 666, beyond the stupid cliffothic shell of some sort of external link, because you are the link. Why would you need a link other than maybe Jesus? In its true sense, if you are strong enough, or reject it if that be your will. The rejected soul is 666. 666 is a number that needs a lot of work, as it is the number of the great work. When you can understand what it represents, you have already made it halfway to the goal, and it provides access through the gate of Doth to Kether, if you know how to use it as a key. So again, it's what comes to mind is that hexagon chamber I mentioned as being some sort of portal mechanism. The whole concept of like 666, I've described it as the torus hypercube, because the torus is the hyperdimensional sphere slash circle or sphere, and then squared or cubed, the hypercube is the hyperdimensional square or cube. I mean, I said it backwards, but anyway, there's the hyperdimensional geometry implied in 666, which I've already went into. I'm just bringing it back up. It's basically like, when you look at it, it's just just a flat number, but it's again the multidimensionality that it provides access to, thus making it a key, being 6 times 6, 36. Can't really see it. 36. It's funny. The sum of 1 through 36. The fact that it's so the fact so many things can equal this particular number, which I seem to harp about exclusively, but it's not the case. It's just that it's like a particular key to the Kabbalah of 9 chambers. It's like the holographic key that gives access again to all the other keys. It's the skeleton key. As would be expected, 666 is also a great key of black magic and destruction. I saw that, but basically, being primarily of a dual or reflective nature, it can also be the guard or spell binding one therefrom. So that's why black magic, people who are led to try to use black magic and wield negative forces, essentially, it doesn't usually end well. And there's other ways of solving problems, but there are also other ways of creating problems blindly, like looking back at this, then thinking that it's all just black magic of conscious, directions. Fortunately, for this power to be of use to any competent magician, the curse of the demiurge must first be reversed, and the curse of the grades progressively transcended to affect even the most basic proficiency, usually rendering the initial impulses to be thus also transcended and transmuted. 666 is thus a necessary capacitor in many senses, and hopefully despite its depth and power can be understood as an ultimately liberative force when grasped, but a restrictive force when feared or ignored, much in the same way similar to the relationship between active and passive phases of mind itself. So again, the focus weaves a web both consciously and unconsciously, and it's just a matter of the heart essentially seems to be the true fulcrum of the seesaw, is the only way I can say it in my quickly. The heart is like the fulcrum of the seesaw in a sense, or where the Y splits in terms of like timelines, or what in the Vajra Rosary Tantra, what's his name? David Kitte, Mr. Kitte describes as setting up the circumstances essentially through the motivation. Motivation is 666, which is like the seed, the heart seed, like the seed of what your true intention is and how it ends up unfolding like a flower, so to speak. 666 is this. So yeah. Even though I am relatively young and the satanic panic of the 80s occurred just before I was born, I have studied the subject of satanic ritual abuse rather extensively and feel that it is time certain keys that have for too long gone unknown be revealed. Despite the general findings that there is no definitive organized attempt to systematically abuse, torture, or abduct people for ritualistic and sadistic purposes by some organized group, does not mean that they do not happen at all. And it should be known that usually such situations are instead actually relatively close-knit, sometimes individuals, and rarely ever, if at all, systematic. Although these individuals operating as like lone wolves can often fit in unconsciously to larger, operations. It should be realized that the only difference between a cult and a religion is the number of its members and the esteem in which it is held at any given time. The cult is usually viewed with apprehension and disdain by the more dogmatic and established religion, though it may be more effective and informative for the individual, which can be more enticing. And in many cases, the established religion is the oppressive and sometimes lethal force. Now, the church is the current system of establishment politics itself. Now, the church is so it's like how I emphasize what words determines how that could be interpreted. But so what am I saying? The church is the current system. So politics is now the church. It is in a lot of cases, or in a lot of these cases, it is not even solitary occultists and witches or Satanists as labeled by the media, but conveniently spit and polish pristine, unquestionable government, for lack of a better word, groups. Look at the many instances in which this was the case, yet they would like so strongly and obviously to blame those dirty Satanists, the whole lot of anyone that even discusses or researches the occult. All that is occult is merely so because people choose to stay ignorant of it, and then without knowing, but the fear-based external aspect of something, deny themselves the deeper understanding and ability to utilize creatively that symbol, concept, or formula. This is being done constantly through the misapplication of occult knowledge, such as the Kabbalah, to already debased and inverted symbols, to negatively anchor the uninitiated, to generate a paranoid and fearful mentality that actually prevents people from actually being able to understand and discern symbolism from actuality, thereby utterly obfuscating both. This is the formula of confusion, the duality of the Lucifer-Satan complex. Some are still even trying to claim that the whole of Kabbalah is evil and mind control, when without it there would be no way to understand fully what is being dealt with. If this were so, then mathematics and language itself would by proxy be evil and mind control, which in the Buddhist sense it may be, but which are nonetheless valuable tools to the proper usage and rightful self-control of the mind. If you're going to admonish the keys to your own kingdom, then you might not deserve those keys. Or when you do realize them, it'll be all the more, unlocking. It is in this way that the church and the state have themselves been the single most obvious, yet paradoxically necessary, obstructions to the progress they initially were created to endeavor towards. It comes to mind how state, using Greek letters, is also 666, and the interplay between the individual and the masses. You could say the church, again, as just not politics or religion, but others. Hell is other people. What's his name? Sartre said. This is a truth which must be and can only be initiated, or why did I say initiated? Intuited. And thus these systems, being as restrictive and fixed as they are, will never even be remotely open to this faculty. And it's funny because initiation, so called, in like the lodge system and all that, people think that mere granting of like titles and badges and regalia or social hierarchies is essentially what it is initiation. And thus these systems, being as restrictive and fixed as they are, will never even be remotely open to this faculty until they are mutually synthesized around the resolution of this paradox. This has already been resolved in the law of Thelema, but the general public has already been mass indoctrinated and anchored negatively regarding Thelema, or is easily so if, like, briefly trying to research it. Thelema, however, really should only be taken anecdotally and as a basic framework and helpful side note rather than as a universally accepted truth, for the simple fact that its transmitter, the Praetor Human Intelligence IWAS, in full and balanced analysis does not in fact appear to be the guiding force humanity should rely on for its evolution. This must come deeper from within rather than without. The secret knowledge of the beast needs to be revealed to the uninitiated, despite how they might react initially in all their horror, as a last hope that they may come to grips with the situation at hand, which only they, each and individually as they may discover it, have the ability to direct. Again, with the heart. Heart health. For your health. For too long has this knowledge been kept away, occult, and feared. It is high time someone put it in plain English so that everyone in India can understand. Just kidding. And so that regardless of if it is chosen to be read or not, it is there, written for all who have wisdom and understanding to find. No, however, I am not the true author of these words. I am merely the reader and revealer of the words of the mysterious one, who wrote this story in which we are all the main characters. Thus attain the secret knowledge of man, so that it may no longer be secret. 666 is the Book of the Serpent, and the number of the Genesis serpent myth, or the serpent knowledge myth, in which the apples symbolized the forbidden fruit, or knowledge, doth, as the apple contains the pentagram, spirit over or in matter. This is the knowledge of the soul, i.e. the self-separation from the unmanifest hidden God into the image and likeness of God, or creation of existence. 666 is the fallen light of the One. One, unity, Achad, being the lightning bolt of spirit, Lux, illuminating Nox, light and dark, signifying the bearer of light, let there be light, and the prince of darkness, John 12:31 and Ephesians 6:12. The number of the fallen light angel is equated with the curse of light, which goes back to the true nature of life and the purpose for the creation of light, and the light of creation. The curse, 666, contains the key to the cures. Thus, Satan is a manifestation of God. Being 666 shows this, as the creation, identified with light, Lucifer, and matter, Satan, is the active manifest principle and outward representation of God, the body of God. The wisdom of God, however, is in realizing its unmanifest and hidden reality, and not being too distracted with the outward manifestation. Jesus says in Matthew 10:16, Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And in Matthew 6:22, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. This is none other than the serpent power known as Kundalini, which of course has been demonized, but nonetheless is indeed the active returning current of the soul manifesting as the biological life force, the Shekinah or Holy Spirit. The rulers and principalities of this world want nothing less than the rest of the mass of humanity internally shut off and blinded, spiritually and mentally. How much more convenient would it be to take the focus off your own actions and inactions than to have the blame and focus put on those already victimized and oppressed? Many of such accusations of heresy in the past were used to take the focus off of, or to cause people to forget, about various other political and papal heresies, and nothing less than a more technologically precise version of the same thing is occurring today in the bread and circus media politic. Even if John F. Kennedy didn't himself specifically say that there is a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman, and child, he might as well have, because this can be shown to be occurring in a number of ways and on a number of fronts, and to such an extent that enough investigation into the situation leads you to find that the seeming victims are in part their own perpetrators being made apathetic and reluctant to even know about it, much less begin to actively resist it by merely ceasing to feed into it. Those vines in the garden coming to mind again, and seeing it's merely an act of clearing out vines that shouldn't even be there necessarily, that you've only allowed to grow and almost given the foothold or the lattice in which to grow so that your own garden can't grow. That is the first key as to what can anyone do about it. What can we do about it? Yeah, well, what do you suggest? Until then, you are choosing to be lied to and are stakes on the table by choice and consent, as Bill Cooper would like to say. 666 unveils all the secret things, if you know how to use it. 666 is the symbolic key to the Book of Life, and is capable of itself teaching how to learn the concealed wisdom with it. For it being the fullest chamber of the nine chambers of Gematria, is God's Book of Life, concealed in one single triple-toothed spark. Ash, or Aleph Shin, in Hebrew means fire, and Shin symbolizes the elemental fire, as Shin is 666. And also Shin is 365, Abraxas, the Gnostic dragon bird or feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, serpent of the Mayans, in whose homage was performed the supreme ritual human sacrifice. 666 is a concealed form of Hashem, as He, Aleph, Samek, and then Mem final, meaning the name, which would normally have Shin, and referring to the holy name of God. The fact that the Bible specifically says to count the number 666 seems to almost hint at the secret of Kabbalah and Gematria. One is forced to wonder why no one else seems to have realized this. Look all you can, ask as many people as possible. No one knows, and very few will care. And why someone rather young and without much worldly experience this lifetime could know this so deeply, having no formal initiation or higher education. Just, this mysterious one talking in my ear. Just kidding. And why everyone else seems so fearful of something so helpful to unlocking this ancient knowledge. 666 is the number of Kabbalah in the Bible, and 666 is a highly important number in the Kabbalah, being that of the Kabbalah of 9 chambers itself, i.e. the 111, 222, 333, 444, 555, etc., which contain the supreme knowledge, 999. Maybe one day, if it isn't too late, people will be able to utilize the power of these keys. Being the formula that unlocks the psychology of the human mind, it is directly equivalent to a human's brain, showing the self-reflective and self-contained mirror-like nature of the holographic mind-brain Lucifer-Satan complex. The difference between the mind and the brain. 666 is supremely important in relation to the funnel effect mentioned in the previous post, dissecting the body of God. And it should be known that not only can V or Vav, 6, Tiferet, the heart, and the sun, represent the funnel of O, 70, being, but the funnel effect plus O, 70, the whirlpool of O, the eye, the physical eyes, and the mind's eye, inner and outer, equals 666 as well. Therefore, 666 can be understood as a formula of the funnel effect itself. 666 is the funnel effect when is as 70 is added to that, just like O. Further support of this is in the magic cone of power, and the cone of power is a V. This V is, however, reflected inwardly, becoming the double cone of manifestation, between Kether and Malkuth, with Tiferet at its center. The center of the peephole is the dot of Doth, the sort of center of the camera obscura, which is the toroidal antipoint and quantum net which precipitates the atomic explosion of phenomena formulating manifestation. This is the glass ceiling of thought beyond which the mind, ruach, the intellect, the so-called antakarana, or the cube in the center of the tree of life below the supernal triad, cannot penetrate without shedding the skin or shell of identity. 107. XYZ. Note that thought, identity, and the egg, bitza in Hebrew, equal 107. Symbolic of the shell or container of the auric egg and the formula of gold. 666 thus contains the hidden knowledge of magical mechanics, which help to master creative thought, through showing the underlying basis of the dynamics of thoughts, since they are ultimately mathematical. And just like a slight angle can end up changing the ultimate trajectory later on, again, it makes me think of directions, and the circle is the compass. Such is the creative and liberative aspects of this formula, but it can also be back-engineered and reversed, as with all knowledge and technology. And thus we can see that it has been, either consciously and secretly, by not revealing this knowledge, yet applying in logos, brands, titles, programs, etc., or subconsciously and without active awareness and recognition of the formulaic patterning. This formula is the number of hexing, owing to its being the full power of 6, the hexagram. It is also the number of subverting the will of someone else by setting the macrocosm, 6, against their microcosm, 5. Clifothic curses, it sits at 6, and to begin, all one needs to do is direct the hate, and the 6, or Vav, of the sharpened point of will shoot like an arrow. So essentially, the prop of Samek, or the Kila of Ajur-Kilaya, to the body and mind, or the X in Greek, 600, of the target. This is the simple interpretation, but since 666 is the circle, particularly of the magician, it is then that barrier you want to penetrate, if indeed you think you have the power to defeat him. 666 is the power of the dark ruler of evil and hatred, being the formula, essentially, of these darker, like certain very enlightening things obviously can be revealed with it, but then some of the very dark roots of things as well. Ruler of angels, the points of light, and ruler of space, the king of the demons, see Revelation 12:9, at the O's center, which is omnipresent as Pantheos. To obtain the dark angel's energy, you must partake of 666 and the reptilian bloodline of the satanic Christ, which is the fusion of the light and dark forces. So Satan, it's just funny, like I'm saying this, each one of these formulas can be applied in any other context, like, or contextual weaving, but I really wanted to get to the heart of this darkness, so to speak, and try to like unravel it. So it gets pretty strange, but the satanic Christ, which is the fusion of the light and dark forces contained in the beast number 666, the bottomless pit symbol of the infinite information of the universal eternity of the hidden higher self, manifested as omnific universal mind. The subconscious or reptilian aspect of mind is the mechanical reptilian mind, which there's a lot of debate as to the terminology, but it exists, and I was just exploring it. Which must be tapped and integrated to receive a direct line of conscious reception of applicable gematria keys and formulas. This is how the majority of these formulae have occurred to me, including that of Hamelech Reshua, angel or messenger or king of destruction and wickedness, while reading various translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So certain formulas, and again, like the adamantine sickle, it won't even be like I'm looking for a specific number, but something will highlight, or like it'll stand out as bolded in my mind, even though it won't be. And I'll go calculate it, and it'll be either a triple number or a number, again, like Uranus being 323, and then the adamantine sickle being 323. Like, I literally just scrolled through that little phrase, not in any distinct font or anything, stood out to me. And so that happens very often, along with books like that I'll read about when reading a book. If it references in italics a specific book or something, depending on how important it is, like, it's hard to explain. I say depending on how important it is. Like, I can't say what causes that. It's just somehow it stands out. Like when I read about the concept of anxiety by Kierkegaard in the book The Fire Tried Stone, and then literally, like, my friend gave me a copy of that book, a friend who doesn't even really care much for books, and yet he had it in the back seat, and then said, "Oh, I was going to give that to you." And I'm like, I literally just read about this book, and I am familiar with Kierkegaard, but not this book. And actually, the book was had two different titles because it was reprinted from 1844 in 2014. And anyway, just the way books, there's some acausal connecting principle or synchronicity behind it, but it's neither here nor there. It's everywhere. But anyway, in the Testament of Amram, in the Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered, I came across this formula, which is essentially like the equivalent to, or the dark equivalent to Melchizedek. And there's a description of him in it that actually ties into, again, I had a dream of a snake, a large snake with a guy, like a person's face, but it was really like alligator snouted. But the eyes and the way in which he came and like looked me in the eyes was like a conscious, I say person, because it was like, no, like I have a snake and he doesn't have a conscience or anything, like, oh, like I can't, like there's jealousy in this snake in my mind, in my dream. It was a black snake that descended out of like the sky, and he like I say levitated, but he didn't touch the ground. Stared me in the face, like almost angrily, like he couldn't get me. And then the next day I looked into that as like just the symbolism and discovered the Hindu Takshaka, which is the king of serpents, or the king of the Nagas, Nagaraja. And subsequently all the codes regarding Narayana and Takshaka, etc. Anyway, which is also encompasses the formula of Mrityu, which is death, which is 666. And it's just funny how many ways in which this figure seems to still resolve into this number in different languages and forms, but yet seems consistent. So this isn't long, but the Testament of Amram, document 4Q 543, 545 through 548, extracted from the Dead Sea Scrolls uncovered by Robert Eisenman and Michael Wise. The Testament of Amram, if indeed we can call it this, Amram per se is mentioned only in manuscript C, is one of the most splendid apocalyptic and visionary works in the corpus. In it, many of the themes we have encountered in the works discussed above come together in a fairly rationalized eschatological whole. These include the usual light, darkness, Belial, righteousness, truth, lying, and watcher vocabulary. So this kind of ties in with, or at least in my mind, with the books of Enoch, including the very nice allusions to the sons of righteousness, which we have already identified as variants of the sons of Zadok, or Zadok terminology. Sons of light, sons of darkness, sons of truth, again widely disseminated through the whole corpus. Added to these, we have the very interesting allusion in manuscript B to serpents and vipers encountered in many texts from Qumran, especially CD V14. Not to mention a well-known parallel imagery in the Gospels, Matt 3:7, 23, 33, etc. Though we cannot be sure that the several fragments and manuscripts represented in this reconstruction in fact belong to the same composition, nor that they can be sequentially arranged in the manner shown, there are in fact overlaps which seem to indicate multiple copies of a single work, and in any event they can be grouped typologically together. In addition, because of internal and external similarities, they are probably part of a cycle of literature associated with Moses' father, Amram. This, in turn, is related to the Testament of Kohath material and the Levi cycle in general. Manuscript C mostly preserves the beginning of the work, but has little in common with Manuscript B and Manuscript question mark, which on the basis of content alone obviously belongs together. Manuscript question mark is referred to in this way in the literature, no more complete designation having yet been made. Manuscript C, which includes the names of the principal dramatis personae like Amram, Kohath, Levi, Miriam, and Aaron, pretends to be more historical. It and Manuscript E even give some of the ages of these characters, which are widely out of line with any real chronological understanding of the Exodus sojourn. The surviving fragments do not, however, show any knowledge of a relationship between Miriam and Hur, as suggested in chapter 3, unless Uziel and Hur can be equated. One should also note the anachronistic reference to Philistines in 2:19, reflected perhaps too in the era of light text in chapter 8. It is in Manuscript B, however, that in the undesignated one succeeding it, that truly splendid material, which can hardly be referred to as testamentary, emerges, or testamentary. This consists again in a visionary recital of the most intense kind, similar to that in chapters 1 and 2, the firm foundation materials above and in chapter 7. Here too, several identifications are made. First, in line 13 of Manuscript B, the Enochic watchers are identified with the serpent, with the visage of a viper, evidently the same serpent that is connected to the downfall of man in the Adam and Eve story. We have probably already encountered him as well in the Tree of Evil text above. 3 more names are accorded him: Belial, Prince of Darkness and King of Evil. This latter name, Melchi-Yeshua, is to be contrasted with the well-known terminology integrally involved with Jesus' messianic and eschatological priesthood, Melchizedek, or King of Righteousness, Hebrews 5-7, a subject that has interested scholars heretofore. The latter has 2 other synonyms: the Archangel Michael, the guardian angel of Israel, and the Prince of Light. That could be Ecclesiastes or Esther. 3:2. Tied to these are the other usages noted above, relating to righteousness, truth, light and lightness, dark and darkness, lying, and the like. The way terminology, again widespread at Qumran and known to early Christianity, is also strong here. All these allusions have their counterparts in their application to the dramatis personae of interest in the Qumran writers and their historiography. The text ends with perhaps the most marvelous light, or paean to light and dark, of any literary work, apart from the Chariots of Glory below and the well-known prologue to the Gospel of John. Here's the text. Translation, Manuscript C, Column 1. So this. A copy of the book of the words of the vision of Amram, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, all that he revealed to his sons, and that he commanded them on the day of his death in the year 136, which was the year of his death, and 152nd year of the exile of Israel to Egypt, upon him, and he sent to call Uzziel his youngest brother, and gave to him in marriage Miriam his daughter, for he said, You, Miriam, are 30 years old. Then he gave a wedding feast 7 days long, and ate and drank and rejoiced at the feast. Then, when the mays of the wedding feast were completed, he called for Aaron his son. Now he, Aaron, was a man of blank years of age, meaning obviously the fragments lost, blank, and he said to him, Call blank and Malachijah, blank, from the house of blank above. He called him blank, column 2. In this land, and I went up to blank, to bury our fathers, and I went up blank, to arise, to bind and pile sheaths, and to build blank, great from the sons of my uncle altogether, blank, and from our exceeding great labors, until in Egypt there died, the rumor of war and unrest returned, blank, to the land of Egypt, blank, to meet, and they had not built graves for their fathers. Then my father Kohath released me to go to build and get all their needs for them from the land of Canaan. And while we were building, war broke out between the Philistines and Egypt, and blank was winning. Manuscript E, Fragment 1. That Levi his son sacrificed to blank. I said to you at the altar of Stop E blank concerning sacrifices blank. Fragment 2. I rescued, he built at Mount Sinai a great blessing at the bronze altar. From among all the people on earth, his son will be exalted as a priest. Then, and his sons after him for all the generations of eternity and truth. And I awoke from the sleep of my eyes, and I wrote down the vision. I went out from the land of Canaan, and it happened to me just as he said, exalting, and afterward in the 20th year I returned to the land of Canaan. You were, Manuscript B, Fragment 1, blank, 1 saw watchers. In my vision, the dream vision, 2 men were fighting over me, saying, and holding a great contest over me. I asked them, Who are you, or that you are thus empowered over me? They answered me, We have been empowered and rule over all mankind. They said to me, Which of us do you choose to rule you? I raised my eyes and looked. One of them was terrifying in his appearance, like a serpent, his cloak many-colored yet very dark. And I looked again, and in his appearance, his visage like a viper, and wearing blank, exceedingly, and all his eyes blank. Fragment 2. Blank empowered over you, blank. I replied to him, This watcher, who is he? He answered to me, This watcher, blank. And his 3 names are Belial, and Prince of Darkness, and King of Evil. I said, My Lord, what dominion, blank. And his every way is darkened, his every work darkened, in darkness he, blank. You saw, and he is empowered over all darkness, while I am empowered over all light. Blank, from the highest regions to the lowest, I rule over all light and over all that is of God. I rule over every man. Fragment 3. Of his grace and peace, over all the sons of light have I been empowered. I asked him, what are your names? He said to me, my 3 names are Michael, the Prince of Light, and King of Righteousness. Manuscript, question mark, column 1. Blank tribes blank. To them and all his ways are true, blank, and he will heal them of all their ills, blank. Take from death, them from death and from destruction, blank. Over you, blessed sons, all the generations of Israel forever, angry at me for the sons of righteousness, between the sons of lying and the sons of truth, I will make known to you, certainly I will inform you, that all the sons of light will be made light, whereas all the sons of darkness will be made dark. The sons of light, and in all their knowledge they will be, and the sons of darkness will be destroyed. For all foolishness and evil will be darkened, while all peace and truth will be made light. All the sons of light are destined for light and eternal joy and rejoicing. All the sons of darkness are destined for darkness and death and destruction. Lightness for the people, and I shall reveal to you from darkness for all the sons of darkness and all the sons of light. So really, come to think of it, a lot of these blog posts are like, the impulse came from dreams, like really old memories, and just, I don't want to say fears, but like apprehensions that I needed to explore. Fear is usually like entirely avoided. Anyway, 666 is also the number of those who do not know, particularly about 666. Many are incapable of understanding some of the most basic concepts and go their whole lives refusing to even try. To them, any input other than that which fits within their limited range of perception and idea of what constitutes reality is hidden, repressed, ignored, or in some way subverted. And this goes for everyone, but like I see in my own way, my own setbacks and subversion, ignorance. And this is the recurring theme, that the key for which everyone is so frantically searching and fighting for is that single most powerful symbol they have feared all along. Really the true power, the force, the motivation, the directions that this symbol comes from. And the beast cannot conceive or understand its shadow once and for all, though the upright man can. There are those, however, who would like to keep man as beast, tamed and domesticated, and without the higher faculties he should and could be developing. Instead, the subconscious tendencies of which most are almost completely unaware, which obviously it takes some strange and uncomfortable situations to become aware of, yet which are running rampant and being fueled incessantly, are pulling the mass of humanity into an even greater ordeal, which it has the keys to prevent, if but it would realize them. And what would that be? Well, like any given situation, like it's not hard to explain. It's just like look at an individual, but apply it to generation, like the last couple generations of with technology. There will be a diminishment of certain things without the atrophy without the exercise. Being the number of cognition, as well as hafren, the mind in Greek, it represents the internal faculty which, like the creative principle of manifestation, remains ultimately hidden. On this basis alone, it has been claimed that individuality, autonomy, self, much less then the even deeper idea of a spirit or soul could not possibly be anything but a myth, a hallucination. And so, yeah, like everything's chalked up as a hallucination. 666 can be used quite extensively as a formula for further destruction of the mental sanity of the target, since it is the ritual abuse digits commonly used in such targeting or organized harassment, otherwise known as gang stalking. 666 will appear quite apparently throughout ritual abuse examination, and it is often a sign used by abusers to signify one another, which is why it is important to go into detail regarding this particular aspect, because anything that is actually a key to enlightenment and empowerment is inverted and utilized negatively. So that's the whole like magnetic energy center being inverted, which becomes a currency essentially. 666 is usually a sign of gang stalking proof, but it can also, as mentioned, which you can't really use it as proof, that's the paradox, but it can also, as mentioned, oftentimes appear haphazardly or be utilized subconsciously, which should be taken into account. Obvious gang stalkers, as a formula itself, like to leave signs as a way to intimidate or even mislead their target. It's like all that's flashing is like a certain year, I think it was 2021, was every day I saw like 666 license plates, and I wasn't looking for them. They literally would pop in front of me, and then I'd be like, oh, what the fuck? And it would correspond with certain thoughts, and I'm like, okay. And eventually it just became where it's like, okay, it was like, if that was ever meant to be creepy, it only became less creepy because of, I was just like, okay. And the chances of it, it's like, that's why I mentioned the year, because that year in particular, it was like every day. And I was just like, the odds of that particular number coming up so frequently, like, why not any of the other triple numbers, which I do see, but not nearly as much as, and I don't see it anymore. It was like, it's just weird. And that's why this number is, it's like, how much can you talk about this number without it being redundant, but yet it's, each instance is separate. So I don't know, it's just fucking weird. It's funny that I mentioned all this. In most cases, this is a symbol to discern abusers. However, a government target, usually, so it's like both of them, like a government target and the abusers themselves, are symbolized by this number of the beast, or mark of the beast. A government target usually suffers from more covert methods of harassment and socio-economic impediments, and silent assassinations are carried out via microwave beam weapons. It's like the scariest, like not scariest, but it's like the most paranoid delusion you could imagine, which is actually possible when you study the potential. I mean, it's not necessarily happening. I'm not saying that people who claim this, that it's happening, that it is, but the potential is there. So, to beam microwaves as a weapon, which can apparently be used for a range of purposes and widely varying levels. It is usually used as already declassified by the military as the creator's voice. So they called it the voice of God technology back in like 2006, shortly after the beginning of the war in Afghanistan in 2003. And then shortly thereafter, in like 2010, 2008 really, was when they began giving them to law enforcement, allegedly. Which can apparently be used for a range of purposes, blah blah blah. It is usually used as already, it is usually used as already declassified by the military as the creator's voice to deceive targets into thinking they are hearing the voice of God, or to cause a target to look delusional. A sound delusion equals 666. So, like, the mechanism, the, the method and forgot how patents are described, but a sound illusion equals 666, and so does hear voice in your head. God, I just realized how ridiculous this sounds because of the fact that it's like, again, I'm just reading this narrative of these codes, and I don't agree with the sort of reality of it, but I also know it sounds like, the most unrealistic thing. But yet, then there's these codes that just, I don't know, it's hard to like try to look at in multiple ways, and so it's like mind fucking me even just to like, because I just want to like in my own mind be like no and haha and like, I don't know, I just want to make a joke out of everything, but it's really kind of serious. So it's kind of the problem though is with I think with the whole issue is that it's so easy to, and I was going to say it's so fun to make fun of things sometimes, like that it's hard to understand how to find like an antidote to the, it's really an equation, but again, the only way I could try to describe it would be this way, and it's just funny. I'd take a second because I would just be laughing, just putting it all into to put it all into perspective. It's just like a bomb going off in my head. Oh my god. Okay, so hear voice in your head. It's just hear voice in your head. I don't know. I know that that's a weird, just basic. Add those things and then it equals that, and then yet these other, like that one. I don't know. I don't like that one. Anyway, there's an important double entendre here, for the voice in one's head is a common and perfectly normal function known as the internal dialogue. It is when this faculty is either subverted or cancelled out by the noise of another innocuous or strange external voice that one should seek to investigate the situation with trusted professionals and find the cause, whether truly internal or external. A subliminal clear channel device was developed by Dr. Oliver Lowry. See patent 5,159,703, which can affect a human's brain and cognition by silent sounds. There is also phased microwave effect, which uses synthetic microwave telepathy via ultra-high frequency or UHF auditory effects. The mind pulsed by microwave gives a human brain X-ray, allowing imaging of neural anatomy and the duplication of a neural network web, or a connectome matrix, thereby affecting a complete neural technocracy of the planet, which I get into later, especially with Michael Persinger's work, he's an interesting character. I'll just put it that way. I mean, he's dead now, but what I am laying out is very sensitive material, and it is a good thing the average person is too careless and lazy to simply read and do the math. But over time it will be seen to be of increasing significance, especially as various technologies and interest groups gain in power and control via these mechanisms. The one-mind computer is being created despite mine and the efforts of others to try and signal what it may portend. See Revelation 17:13. They have one mind, being 666. The light of the mind is that which is either there or it isn't. There are, however, various gradations of it, and the object is to condense it into manifestation for a willed purpose via control of the funnel effect. There are many attempts at siphoning off the energy of this fractal power field. Quantum Kundalini energy, or minus because that formula came up to me today, quantum kundalini energy, and I was like, it's too perfect. There are many attempts at siphoning off the energy of this fractal power field of the thought space, but the primary method of generating, balancing, and containing it is by breath control and dynamic breathing techniques. Another important and powerful magical act is to meditate on key childhood memories. These alone are shrouded and overshadowed by a number of traumas over time, but should be invoked and never forgotten so as to never forget who you are. Many events and karmas occur over time throughout life and act as the friction by which growth is made possible. However, there are forces which are necessarily metaphysical, and that though they are not to be conceived of in terms of mass, weight, dimension, or ostensibly visible characteristics, can be utilized through the extension and exercise of the appropriate faculties for their apprehension and attenuation. This is the route that should be taken by organic, inherent, and ancient tried and true methods of internal development which are being suppressed, not as a frick development, but as an utterly entropic and oppressive force. It is said that those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. This is the schism and war between good and evil taking place on all levels between the forces of Salve and Coagula, or chaos and order, which, through successive eons of back and forth inversion and reversion of the true formula of the life and death process of initiation, has been outmoded and defunct, thus rendering the entire tree and the name of Tetragrammaton, Yod-He-Vav-He, useless. The only means of salvation is through the collapsing of the paths into one single snowflake, 666, to burn out like an all-consuming flame, hopefully to never return unless upright and resurrected in 999, which would signify the inversion and repair of Malkuth, the Tikkun Olam, being 666, wherein the reigns and roles of control over manifestation are reversed. Thus, it is highly significant that while I associated 999 with my true will before I ever knew its full import on September 9th, 2009, when I was only 17 years old, which is Yod, Aleph, Vav, to make 17, which ended up in me discovering through the magic egg of 107, which I received on April 2nd, 2011, 107 years into the Eon of Horus, or soon to be on April 8th, essentially, that the book I was writing, which I felt the need to write about all of this, which I titled Liber Mayan, simply because I couldn't think of an adequate title for it, and after naming after my magical name, I later came to find out towards the end of writing it that the title itself equals 999 with none final, as Lamed, Yod, Beth, He, Resh, Mem, Aleph, Yod, Aleph, none final. Not only that, but that the formula of the material in which I was focusing on through this egg, the incoming of the Eon of Maat, is 999 as well, as does the formula the Eon of Truth and Justice. It just so happened that I found the numerology master key and pulled the infinite gold string, which I say that, but that was like another visualization that I actually almost tangibly, I would say I tangibly saw, but it was like pulling on what links all the way back to when I saw lights, like in the rays of lights when I was really young. Essentially the first memories, my beginning of memory clings to the rays of light, and when I saw them, essentially, which was in cars, it's just various places, obviously, but it's funny because anyway, the light. And my parents tell me that there's certain things that I shouldn't be able to remember, but I do. And simply because I couldn't think of an adequate title for it after. So I later came to find out towards the end of writing it that it equals 999. Not only that, but the formula of the... So anyway, weaving the exterior of the egg of Malkuth and unraveled the story contained in the personal magic egg of the self-creator. The story being manifestation. You are the joke of the Truman Show. That's funny. Another like common paranoid main character syndrome sort of like thing that's just the joke of the Truman Show. The Truman Burbanks, and you are it, the killer demon clown, eater of worlds, Corellin and Childhood's End, which I was literally like watching at the time of, or I think I was watching it maybe sooner than, I don't know, I'm not gonna look it up, but Baskets, a rodeo clown. We are all the clown, the fool, the beast, 666. We are all disposed in the cup of mystery woman, goddess of chaos, mystery woman Babylon, identified in The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop in 1853 as Semiramis. Note, 666 is a value of the name Semiramis as well. Also, Mysterion, symbol, and in Revelation 17:5, the Greek word for mystery is mysterion, which again is the name given to the goddess or the woman in Revelation. 666, who essentially is kind of like the counterpart to Adam, I think. I don't know. 666 is the golden cup. See Revelation 17:4, into which the dove descends and the soul is poured completely. It is the window of the soul, in which all reflects back toward the all-seeing eye. For 666 is the all-seeing eye symbol, which connects all via the web of Akkad, unity. So 13. The spiderweb key, the knowledge of the spider, symbol of the spider, spiderweb symbol code. If after the foregoing has been considered, it is still not beginning to become clear of the power of the key, 666, then we shall look further or look elsewhere. It shows that the calculator grid, or number symbol, which is the symbol of the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, is itself a metaphysical virtual computer. There is, however, a fine line to be drawn between the reality of what these formulas represent and the formulae themselves, and none should be taken as anything more than signs and symbols along the sticky path across the spiderweb. 666 is a lattice program which can unlock the lattices of space-time, and if one can see the energies as numbers and the numbers as a form of energy, then the mathematical matrix is seen as a digital cosmic computer, and all manifestation is inside a simulation. Again, this common concept, or more precisely, a simulated artificial intelligence, God in the machine. Definitely kind of confused with Ghost in the Machine, or Ghost in the well, it makes me think of Ghost in the Shell, but Ghost in the Machine is the Arthur Koestler book, but I like this phrase, God in the Machine. To the uninitiated, because it's kind of like paradoxical, to the uninitiated, but then you could also say the God machines, the machine gods, which of course is paradoxical also, but it's, and I don't like that, and I don't really like the artificial intelligence idea of becoming God. Certain paradoxes I like, some I don't. To the uninitiated, this is the black iron prison of victim consciousness, but to the true Illuminati or illumined ones, the self-realized beings or Mahasiddhas, understood, which is funny because there's 84 like Siddhas or Mahasiddhas, and Siddha, or wait, is 84. And 84 is like some weird Buddhist number that it's weird how it makes me wonder if they know about gematria sometimes, but understand it as the power of the wisdom eye, and the Buddha. But then again, it's not like they have to necessarily know. It can, because the subconscious can manifest these things, and I don't know. It's like the overlap. It's the adamantine sickle. It's the fucking doing things without knowing why, and it's instinctual, and that's why you can't necessarily accuse like people of having 666 in their license plate of, you know, doing it on purpose. Understand it as the power of the wisdom eye and the Buddha's golden flower body. 666 is the digital vision of God, and his light, being omnipresent and omnipotent, radiates and suffuses all. It also confers the Dharma Megha Samadhi, which John Lilly says is the highest level of samadhi. So again, makes me think of that hexagon vision, the hexagon throne room, which I don't think was the highest level necessarily of samadhi, but it makes me think of that leading to, I don't want to put drug experiences, psychedelic experiences on even the level necessarily of samadhi, but in the scale of things, it's not even the whole experience. It's like I see it as the Tree of Life channel, the middle pillar, and various gradations of distraction with what's going on in those realms of mind and mentation, cognition, and ultimately, I feel like this. When I say the hexagon rainbow state of mind, which sounds fucking crazy, but maybe John Lilly would understand. I feel like that the fact that that was a fleeting thing that I just can't volitionally access at any given moment, consciously, but yet had access to for like it was a few hours. I don't know really, but it's hard to rationalize this, and to do it out loud is probably not. I mean, I could sit there and do it alone for more years. Anyway, I guess just thinking of it basically, the rainbow is like it was like a bridge, but it was hexagonal, and there was a propelling motion through the hexagons, and you could choose in a sense which way to go, and each one was a different feeling, like in different color, each direction. That's me trying to or not even but I have to immerse myself in the memory and then try to apply it to what I'm saying is like what I think the Dharma Megha Samadhi represents, which would be like, I guess that's what's beyond that portal. And I say throne room, but it was like, because then there's paradoxes, because it makes me think of Kether and how Kether is, despite being one, and you can describe it as white, but it leads to the clear light, and like the diamond concept, and the lightning also being another analogy. The lightning and the diamond, when you really contemplate those things, it has to do with that outside of time almostlessness, where what we call the past and the future bend around back within, back to each other. Anyway, fusion with the universal mind, union with God, being one of the creators of energy from the void, in the Ma spiritual center above the head, from the center of the cyclone, an autobiography of inner space. Which I actually found that book, like, I knew of this quote, and I had read a bunch about John Lilly, and I don't know. There's just, I was going to say, a lot of people, like, there's a lot of stuff to him, but I think there's a lot of good stuff too. So, Anyway, 666, a black hole beyond the crown, which ties in with Kabbalah, Qliphoth, and Goetic magic, is where the reference of this idea comes from. Opening onto the other side of the system, the other side of the mind's eye. So like Kaphnia comes to mind. This is the one secret chakra, and Kaivalya, the secret state of samadhi, which relates to what is discussed in Kabbalah, Qliphoth, and Goetic Magic by Thomas Carlson, page 139. When the adept of the left-hand path takes the step beyond Sahasrara, he reaches a state beyond samadhi, which is called Kaivalya. The Indian adepts of the light strive towards samadhi, but the dark adepts seek Kaivalya. Kaivalya is a state corresponding to the black diamond that the magician reaches at Thamiel. Here, the adept reaches a state of absolute individuality and divinity. Instead of becoming one with God, here the adept becomes God. This is a state of total trance and absolute presence within oneself. The adept has the universe and all the potential within, and from this can create a new universe. To reach this stage, the dark adept needs to open a form of black chakra beyond the Sahasrara. It is called Sunya or Shunya, and corresponds with Thamiel and the black hole. And so I found Sunya, a black hole, and Shunya, which is crowned dragon, essentially. And I put the formula from Isaiah 14:14 as I will make myself like the Most High God, which is like a summary of that sentiment, I guess. Not that I agree with it, but it's cognate, I guess, but in Isaiah verse 14:14 key. And so I was kind of contemplating this whole verse, or not verse, but blog post. And it makes me think again back to speaking of the middle pillar, but of as Samek, and as that sort of link between the underworld, so to speak, or the inner world, and the outer world, and Uranus, the above, essentially. Let's go back to Uranus. The sky, personification of the sky. And Uranus and Pluto are often like you could say interchangeable, but sometimes I think there's something to be said for potential confusion between Uranus and Pluto as like applicable to being both Doth and Kether. Because like basically it's just funny, like it's the need to like click or cling to things as being one way, whereas I don't know, I'm just saying it's like some people have a clear need for it, for like Doth has to be this, but it's like I don't know, there's something to all of this, but there's also like nothing to it. Anyway, I didn't read this, but it says Alice Bailey's prophecy about 2025 and its links to the Kalachakra Tantra, published April 20th, 2024. We are living in exceptional times. After trudging through the dense materialistic vibrations of the Kali Yuga Iron Age of nearly 5,700 years, we have reached the crossroads of the Yugas once again, when the direction of our civilization will be altered forever. The year 2025 signifies a watershed moment, and our collective experience for the Yuga cycle framework based on the Saptarishi calendar indicates that on the 21st of March 2025, the Kali Yuga will end. This will be followed by a long transitional period of 1200 years, which the Greek philosophers called ekpyrosis, meaning conflagration, when the decadent structures, philosophies, and ideologies of the Kali Yuga will be entirely obliterated, and a nascent civilization based on elevated spiritual principles shall take root. which will eventually grow into the enlightened civilizations of the ascending Yuga cycle, culminating in the next golden age. At the same time, my research also indicates that the destruction of the Kali Yuga civilization is likely to be completed within a small window of time between 2025 and 2040, due to a combination of global wars and comet impacts. These are the end times that the ancient prophecies warned us of when the apocalyptic events described in the eschatological texts will be fulfilled and our reality will be drastically altered. In my book, Yuga Shift, I have provided a detailed explanation of the Yuga cycle framework based on the Saptarishi calendar with its 2,700-year cycle, and I had outlined some of the essential points in my previous articles. Without getting into too many details, let me just point out that the upcoming period of transition in 2025 not only marks the end of the Kali Yuga, which is the current age of greed and lies, corruption and violence that we are living in, but the culmination of the entire descending cycle of consciousness that began in 9676 BCE, soon after the Ice Age came to an abrupt end. This amplifies the significance of the impending transition when a series of transformative events will sweep over us and alter our reality beyond recognition. In my book, I've presented, and so I don't know who this is, Bibu Dev Misra. In my book, I've presented a gamut of scientific evidence from various disciplines, history, archaeology, anthropology, and astronomy, which validates the essential tenets of the Yuga cycle doctrine. At the same time, I was also interested in finding out scriptural confirmations of this timeline. To this end, I came across some very interesting information with the writings of Alice Bailey and the eschatological vision outlined in the Tibetan sacred text, the Kalachakra Tantra. The prophecy of Alice Bailey and Jewel Kool. The year 2025 had been specifically mentioned by the theosophist Alice Bailey in some of her writings nearly a century ago as being a herald of a period of impending transformation. Alice Bailey had written more than 24 books on various theosophical and esoteric subjects. She had claimed that the majority of her works, which were written between 1919 and 1949, had been telepathically transmitted to her by the Tibetan master Jewel Kool. In a very well-researched article entitled The Coming Avatar, author Dorje Jinpa has quoted deeply symbolic passages from the writings of Alice Bailey and Helena Blavatsky, as well as other Hindu and Buddhist manuscripts, to present a picture of the avatar who is expected to arrive at the close of this yuga. Quoting from Bailey's A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, Dorje Jinpa writes, "From the gates of gold down to the pit of earth, out from the flaming fire down to the circle of gloom, rideth the secret avatar, bearing the sword that pierceth. Naught can arrest his approach, and none may say nay. To the darkness of our sphere he rideth alone, and on his approach is seen the uttermost disaster, and the chaos of that which seeketh to withstand. The noise discordant of the warring elements greets the oncoming one, and deters him not. Yet he passeth on his way, sweeping the circle of the spheres, and sounding forth the word." Bailey clarified that the word that the avatar sounds forth is the vibration of his silent will, the impulse of synthesis, one life, one purpose, one family. She wrote that the avatar is coming to the earth in order to further the manifestation of unity, of oneness, and of interrelation, and he comes therefore to wield and apply first ray energy. She described the avatar as an extraplanetary avatar who will accomplish his purpose without taking a mortal form. She wrote that these avatars appear rarely, but when they do, the effectiveness and results of their work is very great. They never descend lower than the mental plane. They bring about death, the death of the old, in limiting forms, and of that which houses evil. Bailey's writings are closely aligned with the descriptions of the Yuga-ending avatar in many eschatological texts, in which the Savior arrives from the heavens wielding a sword, at a time when our planet is plagued by wars and disasters. It makes me think of Manjushri. Like, instantly he just came to mind with like a flaming sword. The Yuga ending avatars have an immensely transformative effect on the planet. And again, Manjushri and Michael seem very connected. And while they may use force when required, it is really the power of their spiritual energy and silent will that affects the greatest change. So the mandala comes to mind. What is probably most relevant for our times is Bailey's statement regarding the date when the avatar will manifest himself. She said that the reappearance of the avatar and the externalization of the hierarchy, i.e., the hierarchy of gods or angels who work for the evolution of human consciousness, would begin after 2025. In The Externalization of the Hierarchy, Bailey wrote, in 2025, the date in all probability will be set for the first stage of the externalization of the hierarchy. The present cycle, from now until that date, is called technically the stage of the Forerunner. It is preparatory in nature, testing in its methods, and intended to be revelatory in its techniques and results. I was amazed to learn that Bailey had explicitly identified 2025 as the cutoff date after which the manifestation of the hierarchy of gods will begin. This exactly matches the end date of the Kali Yuga in 2025, which I had arrived at by a very different method. Bailey brought up the prophetic implications of 2025 date of the 2025 date later in her writing career. In the article The Coming Avatar, Dorje Jinpa writes that in 1945, at a time when the enemy's external threat through Hitler's armies had just been averted, Bailey said that 3 recognitions must be evidenced by humanity before the year 2025 if the destruction of mankind is to be averted. They are 1. Recognition of the Christ spirit within, 2. Recognition of the hierarchy, 3. Recognition of the divine plan. The destruction mentioned here could mean something like the great flood of the last days of Atlantis, although Bailey points out some prophecies say that destruction by fire is also a possibility. If humanity fails to unite under the banner of the forces of light against the forces of material aggression and selfishness, then the fiery ordeal might be unavoidable. Apparently, the year 2025 is the cutoff date for humanity to recognize that we are divine souls and that the gods described in many ancient traditions are the guardians of the human civilization, and it is our sacred obligation to act in accordance with the divine plan, which is to live in peace and harmony and to progressively purify our consciousness by following the ancient wisdom teachings. If we are unable to do so by 2025, and to be honest, that seems quite unrealistic at this stage, catastrophic changes will inevitably sweep over the earth. It is interesting that Bailey mentions that a fiery ordeal may be unavoidable, for as per the Yuga cycle framework, the 1200-year period of transition after the Kali Yuga is called ekpyrosis, a Greek term meaning conflagration, when the world is cleansed by fire. The question that was foremost on my mind as I read these prophetic utterings was, how did Bailey arrive at the 2025 date as a marker of the end times? Since she claimed to be documenting the esoteric wisdom of the Tibetan master Jewel Kul, it occurred to me that the end of the Kali Yuga in 2025 must have been known to certain Tibetan masters, even though it was forgotten by the people at large. But from where did the Tibetan lamas get this date? After a bit of searching around, I realized that the Tibetan Kalachakra Tantra prophecy points to the year 2025 as the time of the apocalyptic end-time battle. The Kalachakra Tantra is a Buddhist sacred text containing some of the most esoteric teachings of Tibetan Buddhism. In one of the chapters, it describes an apocalyptic end-time battle that parallels the Hindu prophecy of the Kalki avatar appearing from Shambhala to eradicate evil. Since most of the scriptures that comprised the Tibetan canon were translated from the ancient Sanskrit texts, this correlation is only to be expected. As per the Kalachakra Tantra, 32 kings shall rule in the hidden, mystical kingdom of Shambhala after the time of the Buddha. Each of them will rule for 100 years, adding up to a total of 3,200 years. The first 7 kings will be called Dharma Rajas, truth kings, while the next 25 will be known as Kalki kings, holder of the castes. The final Kalki king will be called Rudra Chakran, meaning the wrathful one with the wheel, who will ascend the throne of Shambhala as the 25th and last king. Figure 2, Rudra Chakran, the final Kalki king of Shambhala, holding a spear, Shakti, and a wheel, Chakra. Image taken from Edward Henning's website, kalachakra.org. As the succession of the Shambhala kings takes place, corruption and deterioration will predominate on the earth. Victoria Dmitrieva, in her thesis titled The Legend of Shambhala in Eastern and Western Interpretations, 1997, wrote that, as per the Kalachakra Tantra, religions will no longer be duly respected, and aggressive materialism will rule the planet, and spiritual attainments will be of no value. The barbarians, Tlaklo, fighting each other for power, will be finally united under an evil king. After the whole world has submitted to him, the hidden land of Shambhala will reveal itself, and the evil king, overwhelmed with rage that he is not the only ruler of the world, will lead a war against Shambhala. The Tlaklo king will have all kinds of mighty terrible weapons at his disposal. The final battle of Shambhala with the Tlaklo army will be held in 2425. Then the 32nd Shambhala king, Rudra Chakran, will lead his army against the barbarians and will destroy them, thus bestowing the perfect age for at least 1,000 years. At that time, the whole world will turn into Shambhala with no sickness or poverty and no need to work to earn a living. Even great saints and sages of the past will return to life to teach true wisdom, and many will attain enlightenment through the practice of the Kalachakra. The final battle between Rudra Chakran and the barbarian rulers of the earth is prophesied to happen in 2425 CE, which is exactly 400 years after the 2025 date for the end of the Kali Yuga. The perfect age of 1,000 years that will follow the end-time battle corresponds to the 1,200-year period of ekpirosis after the Kali Yuga. Although the 1,200-year period of ekpirosis will be a time of significant earth changes which will purify, rearrange, and renew our world, it will also be an amazing time to live for the survivors of the impending apocalyptic events, for a new divine energy will course through our planet, which will cleanse our minds of egoic dross and activate the dormant chakra centers and subtle mental abilities. As a result, the people of that period are likely to experience powerful feelings of bliss that are inconceivable today. I was curious, though, as to why the apocalyptic battle in the Kalachakra Tantra was prophesied to occur in 2425, exactly 400 years after 2025. When I looked into the calculations in the Kalachakra Tantra a bit more closely, I realized that some amendments had been made or had been introduced into the text, either during the time of translation or at a later date as a result of the date of the end-time battle was extended by 400 years. As per the prophecy, the end-time battle will occur after each of the 32 Shambhala kings have ruled for 100 years each, for a total duration of 3,200 years, after the time of Buddha. Within the Eastern Buddhist tradition of China, Vietnam, Korea, and Japan, the traditional date for the death of Buddha was 949 BCE. Since the first Shambhala king, Suchandra, was believed to be ruling during the time of Buddha, the period of Suchandra's rule is assumed to have extended from 976 to 876 BCE. Thereafter, each king ruled for 100 years. This sequence should have taken us to 225 CE for the end-time battle, but for some inexplicable reason, the third Kalki king, named Bhadra, has been assumed to rule for 300 years instead of the usual 100. As a result, the date of the end-time battle got extended to 2425. As I went through the numbers in the Kalachakra Tantra, I was astonished by how closely the dates and time periods in the prophecy correspond to the Yuga cycle framework based on the Septarshi calendar. Here are the primary correlations that took me by surprise. The first Shambhala king, Suchandra's reign extended for 100 years from 976 to 876 BC. Thus, the counting in the Kalachakra system begins from 976 BCE. In the Yuga cycle timeline, the descending Kala Yuga ended in 976, the exact same date. As per the Yuga cycle timeline, the ending of the descending Yuga, or Kali Yuga, in 976 was followed by a 300-year period of transition, and the 2700-year ascending Kali Yuga thereafter, adding up to a 3000-year Yuga. In the Kalachakra Tantra, the rule of the 32 Shambhala kings extend for a total of 3200 years, starting from 976 BCE. And in the Kalachakra Tantra, each Shambhala king rules for 100 years, starting from 976, whereas the Yuga cycle was tracked by the Saptarishi calendar, in which the 7 sages spend 100 years in each nakshatra, or lunar house, thereby completing a 2700-year cycle around the ecliptic. Thus, not only is the starting point of the current epoch same in both systems, i.e. 976 BC, they both use a 100-year tracking system. These correlations clearly indicate that the Saptarishi calendar served as the basis for determining the dates in the Kalachakra Tantra. The 100 years of rule of each Shambhala king was the 100 years that the Saptarishis spend in each nakshatra, while the beginning of the present epoch in 976 BC in the Kalachakra system coincides with the end of the descending Kali Yuga in 976 BCE and effectively the beginning of the next Yuga of 3,000 years. It is the Saptarishi calendar that begins in the 76th year of each century, and therefore a counting system that begins from 976 and uses a 100-year reckoning must necessarily be based on the Saptarishi cycle. The reason why the end-time battle in the Kalachakra prophecy occurs in 2425, exactly 400 years after 2025, is because of a couple of deviations in the Kalachakra system. Firstly, as I've mentioned, in the Kalachakra system, the third Kalki king, Bhadra, has been arbitrarily assumed to rule for 300 years instead of the usual 100. That's 200 extra years, which should be rightly ignored for computing the date of the end-time battle. Secondly, in the Kalachakra system, the current epoch starting in 976 lasts for 3,200 years, whereas in the Yuga cycle doctrine, each Yuga is of 3,000 years duration. That's another 200 extra years. It is rather odd why the Kalachakra considers the final epoch to be of 3,200 years duration, when both in the Indian and Persian doctrines each Yuga extended for 3,000 years. I wondered if the 200 extra years were added later to the Kalachakra text. My instinctive feeling was vindicated when I came across an intriguing piece of information in the kalachakra.org website, which has been put together by Edward Henning, a renowned Kalachakra scholar, translator, and Tibetan astrology expert, and the author of the book Kalachakra Mandala. Edward Henning observes that there are some problems with the listing of the Kalki kings. The general list given in the Tibetan texts and used in the series of pictures shown here contain 25 names. But the great Indian Kalachakra teacher Vibhuti Chandra pointed out to Tibetan colleagues that the names of the 18th and 19th in this list, Hari and Vikrama, belonged together as one name, Hari Vikrama. He also pointed out to them that some Tibetan lists simply split up the name of number 24 in the list into 2 names, Ananta and Vijaya. This persists to this day. The advice of this great Kalachakra teacher was duly noted by the Tibetans, but in practice ignored, and their misreading of the Sanskrit when translating in Tibetan was not corrected. Now we begin to get an idea of what might have happened. A single name in the Sanskrit text was broken up into 2 different names in the official Tibetan list of Shambhala kings. This definitely happened in the case of the King Hari Vikrama, as noted by Vibhuti Chandra, and it is not unlikely that another error of a similar type was introduced into the Tibetan texts during the process of translation. In fact, I would suggest that the 11th king, Aha or Aja, AJA, and the 12th king, Surya, belonged together as one king, Aja Surya. This is because the term Aja is a title of Surya. In the book, An Introduction to Comparative Mythology, Ancient Near Eastern Studies, Marshall and Pilkey wrote that the mysterious figure Aja is claimed as the father of Dasharatha. Aja is a seed title of Surya. Then the authors identified some of the lineages leading to Rama, such as Radu Aja Surya, Dasharatha Rama, Nabhaga Aja Surya, Dasaratha Rama. In other words, the terms Aja and Surya belong together as Aja Surya, and are very unlikely to be the names of two consecutive kings. It is eminently possible that the original Kalachakra system had 30 Shambhala kings and not 32, ruling 100 years each, adding up to a 3,000-year yuga. Thus, the date of the end-time battle in the original Kalachakra system was 2025. But due to subsequent amendments, either during the process of translation or at a later date, this got extended by 400 years. Fortunately, the original date of this apocalyptic battle, i.e. 2025, was not completely forgotten, but was preserved by means of oral transmission within certain lineages of monks. This is the date that the Tibetan master Jwal Khul had conveyed to Alice Bailey as being the time when the externalization of the divine hierarchy will begin. Since the Tibetan canon was largely translated from the ancient Sanskrit texts, it implies that in ancient India there was a system of tracking the Yuga cycle using the Saptarishi calendar, in which the current Yuga of 3,000 years duration began in 976 BC. The knowledge of this system was lost from India when the country came under a slew of external invasions from the 11th century onwards. This means the Yuga cycle timeline that I have proposed is not a new interpretation of the Yuga cycle. Rather, it is a rediscovery of an ancient method of tracking the Yuga cycle using the Saptarishi calendar. This method was prevalent in India for thousands of years, and then it was forgotten sometime during our long passage through the darkness of the Kali Yuga. One of the questions that I had pondered over is, why did the Tibetan Buddhists extend the date of the end-time battle by 400 years to 2425? It is quite clear that the end date was deliberately extended and was not done inadvertently. My guess is that there was an attempt to bring it in line with the Zoroastrian beliefs about the end of the current world cycle. The Persians, who were the neighbors of the Indus Valley civilization and with whom the Indians had long-standing cultural and linguistic connections, not only believed in a world cycle of 12,000 years, but they also divided it up into 4 equal ages of 3,000 years each. As per the ancient Persian accounts, Zoroaster lived between the 7th and 6th centuries BC and had received his revelation from Ahura Mazda in the world year 9000. This takes the beginning of the current world cycle when Supreme Lord Ahura Mazda had recreated the world to the period between 9600 BC to 9700 BC, the precise time when the last ice age had ended. As per the Yuga cycle framework, the descending cycle of consciousness began in 9676 BC, which is perfectly aligned with the Persian estimates. The Zoroastrian tradition holds that after Zoroaster began teaching the doctrine of Ahura Mazda, he initiated the final world age of 3,000 years, which will be followed by the final renovation of the world when the forces of light will triumph over evil. Thus, the 12,000-year world cycle is scheduled to end sometime between 2300 and 2400 CE. This is the approximate time that the Tibetan Buddhists might have targeted for placing their apocalyptic battle in which Rudra Chakran will emerge from Shambhala and vanquish the forces of evil and inequity. Since the concept of the transitional periods between the yugas is missing in the Zoroastrian doctrine, their belief was that the bulk of the transformative changes are effected at the very end of a 3,000-year yuga. This belief is not correct, as I have shown in my book and previous articles, for there is always a period of transition spanning 300 years or so between the yugas, when a series of cataclysmic events eradicate the older civilizations, and a new wave of civilizations begin to appear in the archaeological records. One of the key takeaways from this discussion is that the end of the Kali Yuga is not some vague date hundreds of thousands of years into the future, as many Hindus tend to believe, but is very close at hand. In many Puranas, the duration of the Yuga cycle had been inflated to a humongous number, 4,320,000 years, by multiplying the 12,000-year half-cycle by 360, and this has now become the dominant idea, even though the 12,000-year cycle has been explicitly specified in the Mahabharata and the laws of Manu. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to dislodge an erroneous conception once people have become indoctrinated with it. But we cannot have different Yuga cycles for different cultures, and my study shows that the Yuga cycle and the Earth's precession cycles are one and the same, and the Kali Yuga ends on the 21st of March, 2025. I do hope that open-minded seekers of the truth will reflect on this information and reevaluate their understanding of the Yuga cycle so that they can prepare themselves to deal with the transformative changes that are on the way, and that have, to some extent, already started to manifest. So I didn't expect to read all that, but I wanted to because it was interesting. That date alone of this year stood out to me, and I was like, wait, next year. It's the first time I read it. Let's see what the Ninth Arch has to say for 84. Interestingly, 84 and 27 make 111, but it's just that sliding synchronicity that wouldn't have happened with the last verses or in the next blog post. But many saw it, none knew it, the gods withdrew it. Many saw it, i.e. the sigil, because it was exposed to public view in one of Austin Spare's exhibitions. No one knew it, because the formula remained unintelligible without a key. The gods withdrew it explains the temporary loss of the picture, for it needed a great effort on Spare's part to recall the formula. This was due to loss of memory induced by a bomb blast which wrecked his home in May 1941 during World War II. The drawing, bequeathed to Frater Eosic, contained the remembered version of it. The number 27, Cheth Yod Daleth He, an enigma or riddle. It is the number which Crowley ascribed to a series of trigrams based upon the Book of Zion. Anyway, entitled Liber Tridramaton, a book of trigrams of the mutations of the Tao with the yin and the yang. See Crowley Liber Tridramaton, published in the Magical and Philosophical Commentaries on the Book of the Law, pages 219 through 223. It is also the number of Aku, Aleph Kaf Vav, the lunar deity whom the ancients called Sin, 120. And 84 is also ODI. It's also Yod Daleth Ayin, so that reversed in Hebrew, which would be I know or to know. I was looking that up. To know, to understand, Yod Daleth Ayin. Initiation, which is Enoch. Intelligent, sufficiently to bring together something spun, thread or yarn, a wheeling round, a dance. It makes me think of the year of Uranus again. Zeta rays from Uranus.